If you had to pick right now, you yourself, who's the NBA MVP this season? Is it Nikola Jokic, the best player in the world right now and for the last couple of years, a 7-footer averaging a triple-double and dragging a kind of mediocre Nuggets team on his back by putting together a season that's actually better than any of his 3 other MVP seasons? Or is it Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, with all due respect to 2017 to 2020 James Harden, is having the best modern guard scoring season of all time and is also a key part of a historically dominant defense and is on a team that's going to win 65 plus games? The point is, this is an impossible decision. These are 2 historically great seasons happening at the exact same time at 2 different positions from 2 outstanding players in their prime with a ton on the line. Jokic could join the extremely rare 4 MVPs club, which currently only includes Kareem, Bill Rusell, Michael Jordan, and LeBron, or the best season of his entire career will largely be lost to history because it's probably not going to be that great in the postseason, while SGA can capture his first MVP and vault himself into a new category within the league at large with a very real chance at adding an NBA title to his resume this year as well. And it's clear that both of these guys deserve an MVP for this season. They are absolutely having extremely MVP-worthy years. And we've had this happen in the past sometimes where we have a couple of guys that are really at the top of the MVP conversation. We've had some Jokic versus Embiid years. We've had, going back to Kawhi and James Harden and Russell Westbrook, we've had crazy MVP races, but I would argue this is the most competitive, historically great MVP race we've ever seen. But no matter how great each of these seasons have been, how worthy each of these guys are of winning an MVP, there can only be one MVP. So let's break it down. First, let's take a look at the numbers because these are absolutely out of control. When you look at Nikola Jokic's numbers, they're just absurd. They don't even make any sense. He just had a 60-point triple-double. He's averaging a triple-double for the entire season, which has just been kind of normalized at this point. I feel like we don't freak out about that nearly enough as we should when it comes to Jokic's numbers, going back to the Russell Westbrook years. Like, this is not a normal thing. This is something that is historic from a statistical perspective. And in terms of overall offensive burden, responsibility, production, this is one of the greatest offensive seasons we've ever seen from a player. The amount that Jokic does on a night-to-night basis, scoring, playmaking, creating for others, and the amount of positive impact that he has from an advanced numbers perspective is out of control. It's honestly getting to the point where it's hard to even quantify because he has such a significant gap between him and the next best guy. And so you might just assume that from a numbers perspective, this is a win for Jokic, but it's not, because even though SGA isn't averaging a triple-double, he's not rebounding as well, he's not assisting as well, he's not as good of a playmaker as Jokic, his scoring numbers are out of control, not only from a per game perspective, but as I said earlier, I think it's the best modern guard scoring season that we've ever seen. I'm sure there's Rockets fans and James Harden fans that are going to bring up the fact that he had an incredible run from 2017 to 2020, where he also only won MVP award, which is kind of crazy. And I would agree, those are unbelievable James Harden years. You're averaging 36 points per game for an entire season. That's incredible. And Harden wins on volume. Points per game, James Harden wins. But SGA's efficiency makes absolutely no sense. To score as well as he does, to shoot as many twos as he does, to score as well on twos and from the field as he does, and not turn the ball over as little as he does is an unbelievable amount of efficiency to have for a guy that has as much offensive responsibility as SGA does. And you can have the conversation if you'd like about his free throw numbers and how that impacts his scoring. His free throw numbers are not nearly as impactful to his per game scoring averages as people would like for you to believe. And overall, from an efficiency standpoint, as a scorer, I think it's the best guard scoring season we've seen in modern NBA history, which perfectly illustrates just how incredible of an MVP race this is, because even as unbelievable as SGA has been statistically this season, from a statistical perspective, this is a point for Nikola Jokic. You just can't argue with the all-around numbers, the peaks that he can hit on a night-to-night basis, scoring-wise, assist-wise, rebounding-wise, the fact that he can get 20, 20, and 20 on any given night. From a statistical perspective, this is point Jokic. But of course, when it comes to winning an MVP, stats are not the only thing that matters. But before we get to that, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, PrizePicks. Right now is a fantastic time to get into PrizePicks, as of course the NBA playoffs are approaching and we still have some college basketball left towards the end of the year as well. One of my favorite things about PrizePicks is all of the different promotions. There's free squares that we talk about all the time on this channel. There's all kinds of different stuff during the week. On Tuesdays, on Fridays, you got Flex Friday, you've got Taco Tuesday, you got a discount on some of these squares and some of these numbers, which means that if you're paying attention, you can take advantage of some really cool promotions on PrizePicks, including one of my own. You can get an instant $50 when you play your first $5 lineup when you use code SPORTING, and click the link link in the description. Again, that is code sporting. Click the link in the description for an instant $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. If you never played Prize Picks before, you just go on the site and you pick a set of each of these numbers, and you can pick more or less for each of these numbers. And if you're correct, you win some cash. So if you have a feel about how you think a particular game is going to go, maybe you think Nikola Jokic is going to score really well in a game, like when he just had a 60-point triple-double. Maybe you think SGA is going to score really well, even in the first quarter. There's all kinds of different numbers you can pick here. You put together a selection, more or less for each. If you're correct, you win some cash. So go and check out Prize Picks, and thank you again to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the MVP race. It can't just be about the numbers. We go deeper than that on this channel. Two-way impact has to have a lot to do. It has to be a huge part of the conversation. We're talking about the most valuable player in the entire league. And this is where things start to lean towards SGA. He is a legit impact defender on one of the best defensive teams that we've seen in the history of the league, and certainly over the last couple of seasons. I personally think his status as a defender overall is a little bit overstated, not a ton, but a little bit overstated, because OKC has so many great perimeter defense options. He's not like he's being asked to do a ton defensively, but he is active and he is engaged, and is one of the only perimeter superstars that actually guards. It might just be him and Tatum and a select handful of other guys. This really matters to me. The fact that he actually guards and impacts the game on the defensive end of the floor, in addition to everything he does offensively, is a huge plus for SGA. On the other hand, everybody knows Jokic is not on the same level as a defender as SGA, but it is harder to guard at the 5, and it's a more impactful defensive position. So Jokic being just fine at the 5 spot, in addition to everything that he does offensively, is actually pretty impactful compared to SGA, who on the perimeter could just be not all that great on defense, and it might not negatively impact OKC all that much. But although Jokic isn't a disaster on defense, SGA is markedly better, and even though you could argue that Jokic is better enough on offense to even out the defense because of his playmaking, because SGA just isn't an elite playmaker the way that Nikola Jokic is, from a two-way impact perspective, you have to give the edge to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander here in the MVP conversation. And one of the other things I find interesting when you're talking about MVPs is peak impact and overall dominance from a game-to-game basis. And this is a really difficult thing to argue between SGA and Jokic, because SGA theoretically, because of the way that he plays, because he's a perimeter player, it's easier to double team him and quote-unquote take him out of a game, because one, he's on the perimeter, so his passing lanes aren't as good when he is being doubled, and two, he isn't as good of a passer, he isn't as good of a playmaker as Jokic. So I think in the postseason, we're going to see teams just take away SGA and try and do everything they can to take him away, and his numbers might suffer as a result, in a way that you can't do against Nikola Jokic. If you double team him, he's going to find open guys, whether they make the shot or not, depends on whether he gets the assist or not, but his playmaking out of double teams makes him potentially more impactful. His peak impact is more unstoppable. But then you watch SGA for a couple of games in a row and you realize that he can get to any point that he wants to on the floor. He can score whenever he wants to, as long as he's not being doubled, and even sometimes when he is being doubled, and that feels unstoppable as well. I think just because of sheer size and dominance and physical dominance, I'm going to give the edge to Jokic here, but it is super, super close. Now, the last piece of the puzzle here that has to be considered with every MVP case is team success. Is your team winning basketball games? And it's obvious that the edge here goes to SGA. Now, the Thunder as a team overall are just better. Their roster is better constructed. Their coach is better. There's a lot of things that are going for SGA and OKC, but also he's grown alongside this team. It's not like he was just plopped into this team and all of a sudden they were really good once he got there. He's grown with this group, and their improvement, their growth as a team has a lot to do with SGA's overall growth as well. And it's not that Denver has a terrible roster. I mean, they won a title a couple of years ago. Yes, they deal with injury issues. Yes, they have guys that aren't as consistent three-point shooting wise. They've lost a couple of guys over the last couple of seasons, but Denver's still good. They're not necessarily a great team, but it's not like Jokic is dragging a team that would normally win 20 games to a pretty good postseason record. But at the end of the day, I think this has to be an edge for SGA, because OKC's record is just going to be so crazy that it has to matter in his favor, even if the team is better. If you're leading a team to almost 70 wins in a season, and it's a pretty significant gap between where OKC finishes and where Denver finishes, I think that has to matter, and it has to be a point for SGA. Okay, so now that we've broken it down, who's going to win the MVP? Who should win the MVP this season, in my opinion? Right now, if you made me pick, I would pick SGA. This is an incredibly strange and tough decision because Jokic is the better player. I think Nikola Jokic is and has been for the better part of the last 4 years the best basketball player on the entire planet. And when you compare this season statistically and overall impact wise to his previous 3 MVP seasons, he's won MVP 3 the last 4 seasons. You compare this year to those other 3 years, this season is better than any of those other 3 years. So him not winning the MVP feels completely wrong, but I do have to go against him here because we don't give out MVP awards in a vacuum. Context matters. If SGA's season didn't exist this year, yeah, Jokic would win the MVP running away. There's other guys that are having great seasons. I think Jason Tatum has been overlooked in the MVP conversation, but the award isn't, is this the best year that Nikola Jokic has ever had? It's who's having the most valuable season, the most valuable regular season player in the entire league. And I think SGA has been just that good. It is by a razor thin margin, but it's a regular season award. And I think because of his two-way impact, his team success, I think SGA is the MVP of the season. And at the end of the day, it's been an unbelievably fun storyline to monitor for the entire season. Both these guys are absolutely worthy of winning the award. But as I said in the intro, there can only be one, and I think the one is SGA.